We do a really good job of having whatever amount of Slack channels we need, right? So for every launch, we have its own Slack channels. Everything we're talking about in that launch is talked about there. Every single event we're doing out in the world has a Slack channel. TWC has on Slack channel. So if you need to ask questions or you need info about anything, there is a Slack channel for it. And pinned at the top of that Slack channel is usually a link to a deck that has all the information.
Yeah.
And so that is a really other big thing where it actually teaches people to fish rather than fish for them. It's a way more autonomous and it's way more transparent.
Welcome to the Culture Goodr podcast with Stephen Leese and Sean Tinney. This podcast is a behind the shades look at creating and changing culture inside of Goodr sunglasses. You can live with the status quo, you can challenge the status quo, or you can do what we do at Goodr and status the quo challenge.
All right, ready when you are, sir.
Okay, cool. So these days, digital communication comes in many forms. We're going to talk about which ones are good for what. But before we jump into that, I think we can agree in person is better than digital generally, right?
Yeah, generally, I mean, I think everything is contextual, right? Where just let me back that up. You're providing a bunch of information. You might need a presentation. You might need an Excel document. You might need graphs to communicate.
Yeah.
And so in that context, maybe it's okay just to Slack something and reply with a thumbs up. You need to give somebody hard feedback. For sure, in person is the gold standard. You cannot give critical feedback via text, whether it's email or texting or Slack. But really, I mean, I was actually getting ready to go like, fuck yeah, no question out. But like as I think about it, I actually think it's just weirdly contextual. But yeah, I think the more we can be around other people in life, just the better society would be.
Oh yeah. And you're so right about that. Actually, as soon as you said that, I realized how many conversations I've had where I was just using words and it was like, why is this not working? And then we turned to a whiteboard or a piece of paper and just drew something out. I was like, okay, we've got this here that connects to that there, right? And so what I'm talking about is this to this. And be like, oh, that's what you mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, we should use this way more often.
Way more often, right? I'm having a New Year's Eve party and create an invite with, hey, here's where it's at. Here's the timing. Here's what's going on. Here's where you park if you want to come. Here's how you dress. And texted that information to everybody, right? I mean, put it in eVibe, but then texted it. That's actually better text. But calling or in person, that people are like, wait, when is it?
Yeah,
what's going on? And so really, I think it is very contextual.
For sure. I guess what I was thinking of is like body language and tone, right?
Yeah. But some things you don't need body language and tone, right? And some things you do.
Yeah.
So I think it really, really depends. The world we're living in now is there's so many options for communication. And so the hard work now is not communicating. It is, are we smart enough people to know the nuance of when's the best thing for this?
Yeah, right. Picking the right medium, the right channel, the right timing.
Yeah. And even, I mean, body language is amazing in person and right. Going on a date. I think when you are using an app for dating, it's an amazing way to find people that are single and you're like, oh, I like how, like I have an attraction to this person. But really, as soon as you connect, you should be trying to get in person with that person as fast as possible.
Right. Because
that's how you're going to figure out all these other things. And that one is unique and body language is important there. Job interviews, the first phase here at Goodr it's a phone call. Then we kind of step through it. And the final one is always in person.
Yeah.
Because at some point you do need to be in person. But if you're just calling to kind of like suss it out, I mean, I think the phone is the perfect opportunity. Actually, it's not. It starts with the resume.
Yeah.
Is that right? So that one we're actually stepping through. We're going full text. Then we're kind of gradually going through the entire process.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is like we start with the most basic and then like level up all the way to in person. That's funny. It's like text, phone, video call, in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So we have always run a hybrid environment. So we're 3 days out of the office, 2 days in the office. So Tuesday, Thursday, everyone's in the office together. What do you think is great about that versus the challenges of it?
Yeah, I think one of the wildest things I experienced in the past year was pre-pandemic, we were ahead of the curve. Right?
Yeah.
We were a Tuesday, Thursday company from our inception, from the very beginning. And people would come here like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Flash forward, pandemic hits, full remote for 18 months.
Yeah.
And then certain people were really excited to come back, and a bunch of people was like pulling teeth. And so all of a sudden, and so many companies went full remote or are still full remote.
Yeah.
And I went for this moment of what the fuck, man? We were ahead of the curve. Now we're behind the curve. What is going on here? And so that's just a hilarious thing that I've experienced recently. So I think that you don't need to be in 9 to 5. I don't believe that Monday through Friday. I do believe it's really important, though, to have some type of connection, right? I mean, they've proven that companies with a high level of trust outperform, yada, yada, yada. So I think it's really important to have a version of in-person, and I think it's important to force some type of critical mass, whether, we have the entire company in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but if you were to do, you could do a version where you could just do teams in theory, right? So the people who work together a lot are connected, but it is really important for a bunch of reasons. I mean, the one that I'll cite is the small coaching moments, I think, right? Somebody crushes a meeting and you're like, you can look them and I'm like, hey, that was fucking incredible. Well, that you can kind of do on Slack. That's actually easy. Great job, exclamation point, exclamation point. Or somebody showed up a meeting unprepared and you can grab them afterwards and be like, hey, Sean, that wasn't good work. It was really sloppy. Your ideas weren't thought through, X, Y, and Z. Here's how you can do better next time. That would take me 90 minutes to draft that fucking Slack. Instead, in 30 seconds, we could have a side conversation. And here's the thing. It's in person. I can give good body language. And so they're not just reading Steven hates me. It's like, no, I'm here to help you.
He's like, you can do better than this.
Yeah. And so those little coaching moments, I think, are the biggest things that are really important. Full remote, I'm not a huge fan of. I think that it works for certain companies. Every company has a culture, right? A culture is not a ping pong table or TWC. Everyone has a culture. And sometimes the lack of effort at a company on their culture is said culture.
For sure.
I have friends who they work for big tech companies. They make a lot of money. They, they hate their culture, but they make a lot of money and they get to work from home. And so that works for them.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but it can work for people. It depends on what type of life you want to lead.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Nothing wrong with it either.
All right. So I'll bet that some people maybe here would wonder, would we ever go fully remote, and what would it take to convince you that was a good idea?
A pandemic?
No. Yeah, right? You're like, we did, Sean, for 18 months, and we're back.
So the amount of things that I thought we would never do that we do now would barely fit in the Grand Canyon. And so there's no way I could actually say, oh, absolutely never. I think that would be a complete disingenuous answer. For sure. I think in the short term, right? So things like pandemic, or if we move offices, right? There's short-term examples that we're probably going to have to live through a bunch throughout goodr.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a compelling reason in a way. I haven't heard of one. I've spent zero energy trying to find that answer. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's one. I just don't know about it.
Yeah.
Do you know? Do you have any compelling reason why?
No, not off the top of my head. In fact, I think more convinced that in-person connection is more valuable than I ever thought it was before.
Yeah, because you worked here remotely for how long?
It was like 2 years.
Yeah. Right. And so you and Dan would be really good test cases for pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean,
what are yours?
My pros and cons?
Yeah.
I think it is, when you're fully remote, it's definitely a lot easier to stay in deep work, like without getting distracted. But the benefit of being in person, aside from just the full like body language tone, like really getting someone's message a lot better, is like you can just so quickly think through something that would take, like, let's set a meeting, or there's like such a logistical headache involved in something where you just see the person and go, hey, can I shoulder tap you real quick?
Yep.
And then 5 minutes later, you're done solving a problem that would have taken hours in any other way.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really huge. Also, it's just you create a really big sense of like connection, and you want to, when you are in person with someone, even when they fuck something up royally, it is so much easier to gain empathy. And it's so much easier to gain empathy and come to their level and help them, where when they're on the side of a screen or Slack, it's way easier to go nuclear.
Yeah.
And that's just I believe that to my core.
Oh, for sure. Well, they've proven that with studies. Like someone behind a computer will say and do things they would never do in person.
Yeah.
So it's like, remove that barrier, put the person in front of another person, and you get a lot more human behavior. Generally. So that's a good thing.
For sure.
Yeah. So a lot of companies use email to communicate, and then you get that infinite string of replies. We banned email internally in favor of Slack completely, right?
Yeah.
So if I send you an email, what do I get back from you?
I mean, you probably wouldn't get a reply. It used to be is Slack broken? Just you don't even address what's going on.
Right.
And this is we started doing this from the OG, from the beginning, right? And this came from we just did an episode on agility and how this came from, hey, inbox bogged down sucks. Spending 2 hours a day going through your emails. Oh my God, how many people are on this thread? I got to read all these fucking little things, like what's going on in here. And so we banned it from the beginning. And then, when we first started, it was one of those things where we didn't have like the robust onboarding process like we do now.
Yeah.
And so people would start here and then they would email. And then my common reply is Slack broken?
Yeah.
And I haven't got one in a while. I know it's happened like occasionally, but we are self-correcting. Nobody engages.
Yeah.
No, for audience out there, if you're an account manager and you work with retailers or customers, right? You're sending emails to them. You might be using one of our systems. If you run partnerships and, if you're a community manager, right? You're Chloe, you're a run community manager, and you're working with other run brands, you're emailing them, right? So people outside of goodr, it's okay to email with, but there's no internal email communication whatsoever. It's all Slack.
Yeah. I was just thinking through the number of times someone should have hit reply all and they just hit reply and the thread disappears immediately.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not even a problem with Slack. It's just, you're in the thread.
You're in a thread, and we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but we do a really good job of having whatever amount of Slack channels we need, right? So for every launch, we have its own Slack channels. Everything we're talking about in that launch is talked about there. Every single event we're doing out in the world has a Slack channel. TWC has its own Slack channel. So if you need to ask questions or you need info about anything, there is a Slack channel for it. And pinned at the top of that Slack channel is usually a link to a deck that has all the information.
Yeah.
And so that is a really other big thing where it actually teaches people to fish rather than fish for them. It's a way more autonomous and it's way more transparent. I'll often, it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but I would get asked a question about, a launch or an event. I would get DM'd and I would reply, could you ask this on the thread? Because there's 10 people that can answer this question. I don't need to answer this question.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I believe the no email, moving from no email to Slack, way more transparency, it teaches way more autonomy, and it teaches people to, help each other out versus go to like the one person they go to all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I've noticed when folks make a transition from one role to, say, a leadership role, maybe they had the answers for a certain thing before, and they keep getting asked that. They're just training people to go to the right person. They'll be like, hey, cool, yeah, but actually Carlos has the answer for that.
Yeah.
And stuff like, I could tell you, but I would rather tell you where to go now so that we can shift this moving forward.
Yeah, right. I'll be back. That's not a Steven question, that's a Sean question.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not a Steven question, that's a Nicole question.
Yeah. Could tell you, but I'll tell you something else instead. So just while we're on Slack, any tips that you found for using it really effectively?
Yeah, I mean, I think, understanding when you're setting up an organization is really creating the right channels. And for us, there's a block of kind of like company-wide channels, right? So just there's a general announcements. There's also, hey, anything culture related. There is a general channel for, we call it Carl's list. And so if you have a couch you want to get rid of, it's Carl's list. And so really getting good at focusing the channel, so it's just not a dog's breakfast. Then we have it for for those big company things. Individual projects get it. So then only people working on that project can be there. Only questions are there. So and then for launches, for events, and then every team has their own. And so really do your work to set up the channels. And then, we have somebody here that goes through and actually looks at it and kills channels. Like nobody's talked on this thread in so long, delete it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's first and foremost is set that up. Secondly, man, we always talk about not reading tone, but you can write tone, right? Emojis are tone.
Oh yeah.
Exclamation points are tone. And so whereas I would love to live in a world where no one ever reads tone ever, we just don't live in that world.
Yeah.
And if you want to live in that, if you don't want to write and if you don't want to read tone, then never use emojis ever. And so, so I think, hey, a well-placed emoji can be very, very powerful. Also, man, bullet points and questions.
Yeah.
Like
just make it readable, scannable. Yeah.
Man, make it readable, right? Hey, FYI, blah, blah. I need everybody to answer these 3 questions below. Please do it inside the thread. And so, right, so I think just the more simple you can be. I mean, I think we are pretty clean. We can communicate pretty cleanly and concisely. What tips do you have for Slack?
Those are all great ones. I think the one for me that I use most often is the saved items feature, because you get all these messages, right? And if they're unread, it can be like, that just builds up anxiety. I got so many messages unread, don't know what they are, need to get to them. So I'll go through, and if I can't reply immediately, like with an answer or something definitive, I just save it. And at the end of the day, I have a daily review. I just go through this feed of saved items, and I'm like, okay, next action, that's a project, and that way I'm processing this endless stream of information. It's basically like you're drinking from a fire hose all day, but I'm like, I'm gonna just put that in a cup over there, put that in a bucket over here, but without ever getting that feeling of like, I need to leave a million things unread so that I'll look at them later and hopefully I didn't accidentally read something and then it's gone forever. Abyss.
That's a strong one. I mean, another one that I think is really good for people is so instead of saving things, what I do is I'm like, I got to act on that. I click it and say, remind me about this in 2 hours or tomorrow. Cause how I work is, do I have anything unread? And so if you read something and you're like, I don't have time to deal with this, you can either save it like Sean's doing, or like what I do is I'm like, remind me about this in 3 hours. Is a huge feature. Or after hours. I don't want to blow people's shit up. So I'll just be like, send later, send tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And so that's something I use a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Everyone does, because Monday at 9 a.m. sharp, it's like a whole bunch of Slacks. Like, well, those got scheduled.
Yeah, for sure. And then the weird thing that I don't know who introduced this here, but it's incredible. So if I'm traveling, I'll just change my name to like @Steven dash, like 000 until January 13th. And so right. So if I'm go to DM Sean and I start typing @Sean, it comes up and I'm like, he's out of office. So I'm not going to get a reply till then. It's basically like the out of office version, but it's super slick.
Oh yeah, totally. No, that works great. And then last one I think is just a fun one. Having the Carl's Gold Stars channel where you can like call people out for doing awesome stuff. It's like, it costs you nothing. Yeah. But it gets everyone piling on,
For sure.
That's just a really fun way to use that thing, I think. Yeah. On the emoji tip, we use emojis very liberally, right? I think I've probably started using punctuation more than I ever have before. Like, wasn't an exclamation point guy before I started here. So they serve a purpose though, right? To communicate tone on some level. We also put them at the front of every calendar invite just so the calendar seems more fun.
Exactly.
But just talk through like, what's your perspective on why we've gone so hard in the emoji direction generally as a company?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, that there's just the way of the world. I think that's really important. We're very visual people, and for me particularly, so all our meeting invites have to start with an emoji, and if a well-placed emoji, it can ground you in exactly like what's going on. Like for me, all my one-on-ones, like for one-on-one Sean, like the emoji is his spirit animal, which is a fox. And so immediately my brain can do a lot more, like I think you can communicate quicker doing it that way. I think it's quicker. I think it's fun. And then I think it can just bring brevity to pretty much most any situation.
Yeah, totally. One that I think is used the most often is like emoji this if you're in, or
Yeah.
if you saw it or whatever. And then people have even made custom emojis.
Yeah.
So like we'll get to Loom in a sec, but always after Loom, for some reason you go boop, like to turn off the video.
Yeah.
And somebody made a boop emoji. So it's like, hey, let me know that you read this. And it's like, boop.
Yeah, it is. I do love the custom emojis that you
Yeah,
right here.
yeah,
They're
totally.
strong.
For sure. So yeah, Slack's great for a lot of things, but giving feedback isn't one of them.
No.
Hard conversations, all those things. So what have you found that's useful for something that's maybe not, we need to have this hard conversation in person, but you don't want to be like dropping a Slack on someone?
Yeah, I mean, so Loom.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you, is that what you're referring to, Sean?
Yeah. And Loom is...
Yeah, so if you don't know, Loom is like a video chat system. So I can just record a video from my phone or from my computer. I get a link and put it into Slack, and then anybody can watch it. It integrates really well with Slack. And so I stumbled upon this because I used it. I started using it to, it's really good if you have like a presentation. If you've ever seen like a presentation where there's like a little circle in the corner and somebody's explaining what's going on, that's kind of like the first way I got introduced to it. Like, hey, everybody, I'm going to walk you through how to close down the lagoon. And you can actually just like create a video that's easy for people to digest, and then realize like, oh, like I could use this for other things. I don't even need to, I can turn my screen off and just have it on me. And in July of this year, it was no meeting week, which is one of them is July 4th, which we'll talk about in a second. I had a stack of things I need to give feedback on. Some of it was serious. Some of it was just people needed my opinion on stuff. And so I think I dropped like 25 or 35 that day. I refer to it as Lumapalooza.
Yeah.
I think I originally heard Lumageddon. I was like, no, let's brighten this up. It's
Well,
Lumapalooza.
it's a little more fun, huh?
Yeah. And what I realized in that moment, Sean, was I don't need to, if I don't need to set up a meeting, right? Like, oh, you want feedback on this? Great. I can give you feedback video. You can rewatch as much. You can send this to other people. And it has become this major tool where in my weekly review every Monday, I grab a list of all the looms I need to send and send them out. And it can be anything from, hey, you asked for this project. Could you give us more details? To somebody did a less than super job and I can give feedback with a video. And so they can actually read my body language, or I can be like, all right, so we're talking about this. Hey, you and I both know this is sloppy. And right, and I can say that and I can smile and they know, right? But if I'm just like, hey, this is sloppy work, you got to fix it. You're like, oh no, Steven's fucking pissed.
Right.
And so it was just a way that I found to kind of bridge the gap between Slack text and in person. It's like the perfect middle ground between those two things.
Yeah. So you've even set up a form. So if I want it, right, I can ask for a meeting, a working session, or just a Loom. Be like, hey, can you just like paint this done for me? And you're like, all right, that's in the queue. You're going to rip it off on Monday.
Yeah, right. So I have a form that my assistant Hannah runs, but she'll just give me a list that is, hey, Rach reached out, wants you to paint it done for this project. So I'll just hit record and like, hey, Rach, so here's what I mean. And I'll like contextually explain through what's going on. Or somebody might send me a presentation and want my feedback. And for me, it's way easier just to hit record and be like, all right, hey, so here's the feedback. Love this. So on this page, I'm getting lost for these reasons. And then, I can actually like tactfully walk them through it. And then that person can actually watch that as many times as they want. Or I'll send a Loom and I'll send it to you and I'll be like, hey, you can share this to whoever you want. And then you can share it with other people if they're involved in the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on our leadership retreat a while back, we were doing this storytelling game, right? One of the questions was, what do you want, but you don't have? And I couldn't come up with an answer, but I was like, better answer this question, 30 seconds of time back, right? Like something different. But it feels like Loom is kind of that, right? Like you get to restart if you want.
Yeah, and there's an amazing stat on Loom. I don't know how they rack it up, but it is how many meetings you've saved by your Looms.
Yeah.
And I'm over 400 meetings.
Holy
this year. So I don't know how that metric's calculated.
It's like bottles of water saved from the little baby
exactly.
thing.
That's exactly what it's like. But so for me, right, I used to think, all right, well, I got to find 15 minutes to talk to this person to give him feedback. X, Y, and Z. I don't have to do that anymore,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there are tactical reasons for meetings and not, but a lot of things can just get decided or can be decided in a Loom.
Mhm.
I mean, and this isn't just me either, right? Now it's way more adopted company wide where Brian, who is our channel lead for key accounts, created like a decision matrix. I'm like, here's what we look like for a key account retailer, and sent a Loom to get feedback. Now, if you don't have the pro account, like I have the pro account, so I'll spin off into oblivion. But if you don't, it's 5 minutes max, which is actually a really good limitation for people. And so he was able to send that whenever. I could digest it on my own and think about it, and instead of like having to get 10 people in a room, just send this out. And so it does create a lot more like space and time back.
Yeah. And kind of it keeps the meeting clog thing from clogging up a project, right? Because it might be hard to get on your schedule, but it's not that hard to send a Loom.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I mean, one of the really cool things about a Loom is if I have to give somebody, I mean, I'm talking really hard, I'm going to break you down feedback. I do that in person. I would never do that via Loom.
Yeah.
But there is a time of like, all right, well, I need to give some critical feedback on this project because it's not great. I have dozens of times recorded a Loom and deleted it. I'm like, Steven, you sound like a fucking prick. Right? Like that's not you're not gonna get better work out of people like that.
Right.
And so it kind of gives you a safety blanket, which is a really important thing to understand. And right, especially if you're new to having to feedback, if you're new to leadership, this is a really great way to be able to like give yourself a redo.
Yeah, for sure. Think it through, try it, go, well, that's not it.
Yeah. And also I get asked, I said, I'll see a presentation in real time and I'll need a day or two I need to process it. Like, get any feedback? I'm like, no, I'm still processing it.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so I think a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this, have a meeting, feedback anybody?
Yeah.
And they're like,
I don't
know. I need to soak this up.
Yeah,
so
totally.
That's a really important thing. And it's what I love now is like I think everybody at this company does Looms. Or they should. I know I get a bunch from other people.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So on that note, I think people would love to know if they get a Loom from you, what's the best way to reply?
Yeah. I mean, I think that usually I'm good at making it ask. I mean, the best way to reply is, got it, I'll follow up, right? Or, one, just acknowledge that you watched it. I mean, I can see who watched it, so there's that.
Oh, literally who, or just numbers? Okay, cool.
But I don't actually ever go back and do it. I just assume because people here are good at their job. I'm not checking up on people.
Right.
But I think one you can acknowledge it in any way of like, got it, I'll follow up. All you need to do is acknowledge it, that you watched it. Really, that's the only thing. I mean, even if it's critical feedback, got it, working on it. That is like, hey, I am in on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is the absolute best way.
Yeah, right on. One of the things I've started doing, if there's like a group Slack, because you'll be like, okay, Hannah, Hancy, Nicole, Sean, probably, and then like send it to a group. I'll as I'm watching it, I'll just take notes on like what are the main points, what are the things you're asking for, and then I'll just paste that back to the thread so that anyone who is on there can go, oh yeah, what's in here? Like, because often you're looking for like, what was that Loom? Oh yeah, that was the one that had it, and then you can like scroll to seems like in the middle,
For sure.
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, that's it. Just to like make sure that it acknowledges that saw this, understood what you were saying, and also kind of like does a service to myself and others. It's like what is in here and who needs to do what about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm trying to struggle with is being the CEO is I inherently know somebody gets a Loom from me, their anxiety's gonna spike. I'm not an idiot, and so I oftentimes will record a bunch of Looms Friday afternoons and send them Monday morning because nobody's doing like getting like a Loom from your CEO on Friday afternoon. I mean, even if it's 3:00, I'm like, hey, by that time you're just zoning out. So I'm very mindful. I've also really tried to make an effort to do Looms of all variety, so it's not just critical.
Right.
And so sometimes I'll just throw some stupid shit in there because I would love to get this to a point where, if I shoulder tap somebody hall, like, hey, you got a second? Most people's like their reaction isn't like, oh, fuck that, cool, what do you have? And so I would like to get Loom to a point where that's the case, and it's for sure not there yet.
Yeah, totally. Got to find the right balance.
Yeah, I mean, like if I DM anybody here where I'm like, hey, you got 5 minutes? Can you come to my office? I'll always follow up with ... nothing bad.
Right.
I will say that
it's fine. Yeah,
because I want them to know this isn't the principal's office. I just have something that we could solve in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
but that's another form of like just better communication.
For sure.
Know your audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember there was a comedian that was saying the cops would be better liked if every now and then they pulled someone over and they were just like, awesome right hand turn right there. Just want to give you a little gold star.
Yeah, you killed it there.
Yeah, totally. He was crushing it. You're like, ooh, I hope it's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, damn. Cool. So we talked through like a lot of the text and video side of things, but we use decks a ton at goodr, and like to the point where it feels like the currency of goodr is
presentation.
Yeah, exactly, a presentation. So why do you think we like them so much? Why are we so into them?
Well, I'm very aware that most of these systems at goodr are set up because this is how I function. So let's just I will own that. Where I got taught using presentations at Easton from just a couple of amazing mentors. And the power that, there's the storytelling aspect of a presentation, but then even to manage a project, so a deck is a PowerPoint, Keynote, Google Slides, insert whatever, but it really gives you can contextually step through things. So you can, like, here's your overview slide. You can break out sections. It's just I think it's a way better way to digest information. Also, we all are used to a TV screen, which is that landscape format. And so a Word doc is not that.
Right.
And so think about that, right? So, a slide, it puts one thought on the screen at a time. And so that's the thing that's really, really important. And with the invention of Google Slides, it's so easy to share and edit. And so the cross-pollination and the group work on there, I think there's a lot of reasons. And then if you're at a meeting and you're presenting, you just take that deck and put it up on the screen, and you're actually saving work there.
And then the other thing is you Slack the deck out after the fact. Be like, well, you can take notes if you want, but I'm also going to share this deck with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. It is an amazing tool, resource for that.
Yeah, and then I think the other cool thing is like templates. We're always changing the goodr template, right? Every now and then it gets a refresh, just better use of space. But then you'll see teams just make something really cool, like a great way to display information that we all need to
there's a timeline.
Do. Yeah. So it's like, oh, hey, let's put that into the bank, And then little by little we build up this library of like just cool ways to communicate the same kinds of information. I just think that's a really neat benefit of. It's almost like owls for decks, just constantly updating the templates.
And our template is extremely vibrant. It is, it's a white base. There's like palms and pink and teal, and so it's also just a fun, vibrant tool.
Yeah,
we have templates. We have so much. We have pre-cropped photography that you can use, and so it actually we make it really easy for somebody here to. A novice put together like a legit looking deck.
Oh, that's so true. I completely take for granted the incredibly vast library of amazing content that's available. And it's all just right there. It's like, oh, this
is pre-copped the right size.
Yep.
Yeah, it's legit.
That helps. Yeah. Good image tells a great story. So we've also built in a number of checkpoints to help ourselves stay accountable throughout each quarter, to communicate certain things in certain times and ways. And we just shifted our calendar schedule from quarterly, like fiscal quarters, to trimesters.
Yeah.
Feels kind of schoolish, but we found a lot of reasons why we might want to do that. So can you talk through just on a high level how we ended up there?
Yeah. I mean, financially, we're still on the quarter system. So I'll preface that. Anything that's fiscal stays, but that's a very small amount of like major commitments. So we started off quarterly, right? So a goodr stock every quarter, right? AMP, that's our quarterly review every quarter. PDA, which is our big planning meeting every quarter. And so we looked up one day, and if you have 3 major initiatives and you have 3 months in a quarter, every month of the year there was something major at goodr, which is exhausting. Now, I will say I would do it again because when you're doing anything new, repetition is key, right? Just do it like clockwork. All right, we do this every quarter. So by the time you do it, you're there for a year. You're like, well, I've done this 4 times.
Yeah.
And then in July, I realized I sat through an AMP where it was dialed. And there was even 2 people that I was in that they got really low quarterly review scores, but they were self-aware. It was clear they were getting feedback from their flock leader or flock star beforehand. And so it was a really like smooth process for something like that.
Yeah, the checkpoints are working.
The checkpoints are working, right? And then a month later, I'm in PDA, and it used to be PDA, which is our quarterly big planning meeting, and stands for present, debate, align. And it's how we like align on projects. When we first rolled it out a few years back, people were getting blindsided. They're like, "You're doing what?"
Yeah.
And now everybody knows what's going on. We used to have 30-minute blocks every hour for questions. Like I'm begging people to fucking step to that mic.
Please, questions.
And the quality of presentation is out of this world. And so I realized I'm like, oh, we don't need to do this as much. And even goodr, which is a really important connection event, it makes it more special when you kind of pull it out. And so really started realizing, oh, well, let's go to trimesters. And so when you go to trimesters, so you remove 1 week of goodr, 1 week of AMP, 1 week of PDA, then tweaked a bunch of other things, like added some stuff, reduced TWC. So our staff meeting, which in 2020 or 2021 we probably had 40 of. This year, I think we're due to have like 36, and this next year we're gonna have 24. And that's 8 per trimester. And so, really, this came from us getting really good. And there's other things in there that I won't talk about, but the big thing that in doing that is it went from in 2022 we had 69 days. I didn't make that. That just happened that way. With really high level, impactful meetings on it. Not everybody is at them, but like leadership, big critical masses of the company. And in 2023, we're going to go from 69 to 41. And so that is 28 days less. That's over 5 working weeks less of these major energy polls. And so, and there's a lot. This communications is a big part of it. And really, it has been really, really impactful. And then I think we're going to talk about later, and then, inserting more no meeting weeks.
Yeah. So let's talk about that now.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I don't remember. Do you remember how that came to be? Like,
before the meeting week, what was your reaction when I rolled out trimesters? It was like a month or 2 ago.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, the stats, like anytime you do the math on like, if I did something for an hour a day, how much time would that get me? It's like, oh, so much time.
Yeah.
And you add that up. It's like, that's over a month of thinking deep work time that I didn't have before that I will have now. It just feels like, okay, great. And then I had this thing, I was calling it a quarter. It was like a flamingo year. Like everything that's going to happen to you at goodr will happen within the course of that time. Yeah. So like if you've been here a year, you're 4 flamingo years old, right?
Yeah.
So this is like recognizing that was a pretty like intense pace.
Yeah.
So if we want to create more space, we've got to change something. I think that was a genius thing to do. Just pull out 25% of the meetings, set them aside, and recognize like, well, we're getting what we need out of these, and we need to create more space for people to focus. So I feel like it's really, really effective. I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I think it actually allows people to plan way better too for their year.
Yeah,
which is really important.
Oh yeah. Man, looking at everything for our flock, I can see all 3 trimesters, every single thing that's in there, including no meeting weeks, and can plan for like, all right, so goodr University, my flock needs to do a thing right before that. That's like, hey, let's everybody take a look at your calendars, check all the meetings that are repeating that you've just sort of replied yes to, and decide, do I need to be in these anymore? Is this still effective? Could this be a Slack? Probably it could, or a Loom, right? So we do a whole reset and refresh to say, we've got a lot of stuff on our calendars. Probably not all of it needs to be there. Let's clear it off. And then this no meetings week idea is just like whatever's on there, take it off.
Yeah.
And do work, right?
Yeah. So that came about quickly. Big shout out to Savannah, who did a ton of work on the trimester project, and Hannah, who did a ton of work on the trimester product.
Oh yeah.
Savannah actually went down the path of calculating man hours and like how much money we've saved in salary. And I was like she did a first pass. And I'm like, this is so, I can't even, you know what, don't do it. Just stop spending time on it. It's so high, but it's a lot of money that we're saving doing this. So no meeting week came about, I want to say 2020, and it was just general exhaustion and realizing it's just meeting creep is a real thing. And so went from did a presentation, went from meeting bankruptcy, where I'm like, all right, everybody has to take everything off their calendar, everything unilaterally, and then decide what comes back. And we're also, we are a exploding company, so getting a conference rooms is hard. And so then we had like leaders and project leaders in a room, and we kind of like started to add things back slowly of what do we really need to be meeting on? And it came from a place of you just looked up, and since we're a Tuesday, Thursday company, it was kind of all over the place. And so we decided, hey, you can only do meetings Monday afternoon. So Monday after 1 p.m., after 2 p.m. actually, Tuesdays and Thursdays. You can't have meetings here Wednesdays or Friday. And so to do that, we had to kind of restructure it. And then we kept it. So we decided that between Christmas and New Year's, no meetings whatsoever. You cannot have a meeting. And then July 4th week, we added the next year. And then moving forward next year, we're going to do 4 no meeting weeks, like basically one every 3 months or so. And then, your team is charged with the week before or the 2 weeks before, doubling down on messaging of like, hey, how do you opt out of meetings? How do you make sure that, you don't have too many meetings on the calendar?
Yeah, for sure. And as you're saying that, I'm realizing like, a lot of our Tuesday, Thursdays are meetings.
Yeah.
Because we're all together. So let's use that time to meet, right? Yeah. It's just make sure all the times you're meeting or really need to be a meeting.
Yeah. It's not perfect. We learn, we fall back in old habits. And that's why every quarter we kind of want to reset on it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, man, I feel like we've covered a bunch today. Anything you didn't get to bring up or want to take again?
Well, I end every loom with a boop. So I boop the camera and then kill it. And so that is my way of bringing some type of brevity to anything that's critical.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you could have, hey, this has got to change this and that and the other thing. All right, I believe in you guys. Boop. It's like, all right, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. So with that, boop.
Thanks for listening to the Culture Goodr podcast. To submit questions for the podcast, learn more about our culture, and learn how you can status the quote challenge, head over to goodr.com/culture. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening, including on YouTube, where you can now watch all of our new episodes. Who knows? You might even catch a glimpse of Carl at our headquarters if he's not already passed out at the tiki bar from all the margaritas.